We are here with Greg Dennis. He is part of Voter Choice for Massachusetts. He's actually the co-founder of that to help talk us through the ranked choice option on our ballots this November. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
Happy to be here.
So right off the top, can you give sort of an easy understanding of what folks are facing come November 3rd with this question?
You know, I doubt there's anyone listening who would say we have a healthy and well-functioning political system in the country today. The truth is we have a system that promotes division, not consensus. It's a system that lets candidates win without a majority of the vote. It shuts out diverse and independent voices. And it's a system which many of us vote not our hopes, but our fears. And ranked choice voting, which is question 2 on the ballot, isn't going to solve every single problem with politics today, but it's one simple, fair, and easy thing we can do right now to help make things better. So in most elections today, as you know, you can only pick one candidate. Under ranked choice voting, you can still pick one as you would today, but you have the added option, the added power to rank additional candidates, a second, third choice, as many or as few as you want. And that means if your first choice candidate doesn't have a shot to win, your vote counts instantly towards your backup choice instead. And ultimately, the candidate we elect has a majority of support.
So if your first choice doesn't lands at the bottom, then your second choice moves up into the ranks, right?
Exactly. So the way it's counted is we count all the first choices, and if any candidate has a majority of the first choices, that candidate wins there and then, and the election is over. But if a majority meaning more than 50%, but if any candidate does not have more than 50%, then the last place candidate is eliminated. And everybody that voted for that candidate instead has their vote counted towards their second choice instead. And that process continues until somebody wins with a majority of the vote. It applies to state and federal elections, does not include city or town elections, and does not include the presidency.
And it also eliminates runoff elections, right?
In Massachusetts at the state and federal level, we do not have runoff elections. But it is a good alternative to runoff elections. Some states around the country do have runoff elections. If nobody gets 50% in the first election, they invite everybody back again to vote again on the top 2 finishers in order to get that majority. That's basically double the cost, double the administrative hassle, and runoff elections around the country see on average about more than a 35% drop in turnout to people that show up in the runoff. So this is a simpler and easier and cheaper way to get a majority winner with more people participating in that final round.
And how do you speak to the argument? Some people are saying that this could be challenged on its constitutionality.
Well, it certainly could be challenged. You know, in this country, anybody can bring a case, but we're pretty confident nobody would win. We've looked at this for a long time now with legal experts and scholars throughout the state. It's been before the federal courts now 3 times, each time with federal judges saying there's no conflict between ranked choice voting and the U.S. Constitution. And at the state level, there's also been state cases where the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, ruled that ranked choice voting is compatible with the Massachusetts Constitution. So, you know, there's no telling what anybody might want to throw at the wall and see what sticks, but we're confident we would prevail in any court case.
The loudest argument against ranked choice is it's confusing. You want to speak to that? Sure.
I kind of scratch my head at that argument. You know, I take my 5-year-old son to go get ice cream, right? And if they don't have his favorite flavor, he asks for some obscure flavor that they're out of. What does he do? Is he going home without ice cream? Like, you bet not, right? He's asking for his second choice. And if they're out of that, he's asking for his third choice. The idea of having a second choice, a backup choice, maybe a backup choice is something very natural, something we do every day. And people around the country and around the world that are using ranked choice voting, it's been used in this country and around the world for over 100 years, are saying they like it, they get it, and they don't want to go back to the old plurality system.
And I think one important thing to point out is in Massachusetts, which is predominantly Democratic, ranked choicing would lead to more diverse representation.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they've seen in places that have it around the country. So in the Bay Area of California, where it's been in place now in 4 cities in some of those cities up to 16 years now, they went from 38% of seats held by people of color prior to ranked choice voting to 62% today. Because it's a system that encourages more voices and choices to run in the election. And candidates are just less likely to be told to, wait their turn, right? Or they're not the traditional type of candidate that might run. And when you get more diverse people running, more diverse people end up being elected.
On your site, you mentioned that ranked choice voting discourages negative campaigning. Could you speak to that?
In politics today, it seems like everything's this very us versus them, zero-sum game. And in ranked choice, candidates are still trying to be your first choice. That's their goal. But if they can't be your first choice, they want to be your second or even your third choice. So candidates have an incentive to reach out beyond their core base of support to talk to supporters of their opponents and try to find common ground and say, you know what? I know I'm not your first choice, but here's where we agree. We spend so much time in political discussions today talking about how we disagree and how we hate each other. And this is a system that incentivizes the opposite, to talk about what we agree on and where we can find common ground.
And Greg, do you feel like there's more push and momentum behind ranked choice now with the ranker and the division in the country and politics at all levels?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. People are looking for solutions, and this is one that's used in this country, used around the world. It's been growing at a pretty rapid speed. As you know, it's hard to change the voting system, but as voting systems go, it's been growing pretty rapidly within this country. It isn't going to fix everything. We're not going to oversell it. It's not going to fix every problem we have in politics, but it's one simple thing that does help fix some of these most pressing problems we face.
So Maine began using ranked choice voting in 2018, right?
That's right. They enacted it at the ballot in 2016, and their first run of the system was 2018. It went very smoothly. It went more smoothly than most people predicted. It was cheaper to enact than most people predicted. And, when it passed at the ballot, it passed with 52% of the vote, so a majority, but a slim majority. The voters then had to reaffirm it at the ballot in 2018, where it went up to 54% of the vote. And then in November of 2018, exit polls had it at 61% of support. So in one election cycle, you had growth in support of 9 percentage points. So I think the more people are exposed to it, the more they use it, the more they seem to like it. I think that trend will continue as we get, 2, 3, 4 election cycles out here. Yeah, we have, bipartisan support. We have the co-chairs of our campaign include former Democratic Governor Deval Patrick, former Republican Governor Bill Weld, former Republican Lieutenant Governor Kerry Murphy-Healy. You see Republicans in Utah passing ranked choice voting legislation. So we do have bipartisan support, and we have Greens and Libertarians and people of every party and people of no party coming together around this and uniting around this reform, because it's not trying to elect candidates of a particular party or a particular political persuasion. It's really about empowering voters, giving them more voice and giving them more choice, and ensuring the candidate that wins has a majority of support.
Greg, I just wanted to ask too, your personal involvement for this. What were sort of the turning points in your life that made you such a believer and such a fighter for this movement?
Well, the first presidential election I was old enough to vote in was the 2000 presidential election. And I was in college at the time. A lot of college students, felt very conflicted. A lot of them wanted to vote for Ralph Nader, right? And my student newspaper endorsed Ralph Nader at the time. And they felt like they couldn't. They felt like they'd be throwing their vote away. And there were people on the conservative, end of the spectrum that wanted to vote for Pat Buchanan and felt they couldn't vote for Pat Buchanan in that election, or years earlier for Ross Perot. Ultimately in those elections, we saw candidates win without a majority of the support, and these independent voices in the race shamed as spoilers, told to get out of the race, and voters conflicted over whether they could vote their conscience or whether they had to settle for the, quote, lesser of two evils as they saw it. And my college at the time was using ranked choice voting to elect its student government, as many colleges in Massachusetts and around the country do. It seemed like, well, if we could do it for a student government election, this would clearly solve the problems we're seeing at elections at all levels. It just makes perfect sense. I don't know why we're not doing this already. And here we are.
So it really does allow people to vote their hearts. And
Yes.
It's not a throwaway vote, right?
Exactly.
I mean, maybe you may only make it to the bottom of the heap, but you still have your second vote or third or fourth that matters.
That's the idea. You can support, if you like an independent candidate, an underdog in the race, somebody that doesn't, isn't the traditional type of candidate, you can take a chance on that person. They don't necessarily have to be viable. But, sometimes that viability question, that electability question is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? This person's never going to win, so we're not going to vote for them. Why are they never going to win? Well, because nobody's voting for them. So sometimes you can beat that cycle of, delegitimacy by letting people take a chance on a non-traditional candidate. And maybe that grows into something and maybe it doesn't, because ultimately you still need a majority of the voters to vote for you. But at the very least, it allows new voices in, it allows more people to participate, and allows voters to vote their conscience.
And Greg, if people want to learn more about ranked choice voting, how can they do that?
The website is yesonto, that's the number 2, yesonto.rcv.com.
All right. Well, thanks for helping us understand this.
Glad to be here.
We are joined by Cheryl Longtin. She is part of No to Ranked Choice Committee, and she's joining us to help explain question number 2 on everyone's ballots this November and her opposition to it. So thanks for joining us, Cheryl.
Thank you for having me.
So right off the top, can you give us a brief explanation of what ranked choice is?
Sure, I'll give it a try. Basically, ranked choice, this system would ask you to completely change our current voting system. Right now, it's very straightforward. One person, one vote. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Very straightforward. What this system would do would be to ask you to rank all your choices. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. And if no one gets more than 50%, the person with the least votes is eliminated. Their voters, the people that their voters voted for, then their second choice gets reallocated. That gets added, and they try to keep doing this round after round until they try to get somebody over 50%. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, but folks aren't obligated to vote for multiple candidates or options. They could just do one, or they could vote for as many as possible.
Well, that's true. The issue with it, though, is if you vote for one candidate and your candidate is eliminated, then you're not participating in the runoff, and it's like you never voted. Alternatively, you can try to vote for some of the candidates or all of the candidates. But imagine, we had a primary recently where there were 10 candidates. I mean, imagine going into a ballot booth and trying to understand enough, know enough, and want to rank 10 different people, for example, and how difficult that would be.
But to be the devil's advocate here, the
Sure.
person who won that primary won by 23% of the vote. Now, is that a representation of the people's voice?
First of all, if you have many candidates, there's no way that one person is easily going to get over 50% of the vote. So anything that you do is going to be difficult. But I would argue if you have a real runoff, with, let's say, the top 2 vote getters, then at least the voters can make an informed choice. They know these are the last 2 people. These are the 2 people that got the most votes, and they can look at them, look at their policies, and make a decision. When you're in a large primary, such as one like that, you have really, you don't know who the final 2 are going to be. So it's really a guessing game.
So it's your contention that a voter could make a more informed choice if there are less choices?
I would say, no, I would say they could make a more informed choice if we had an actual runoff with the top 2 vote getters.
I see.
Have a separate runoff election. Then you would know who the top 2 people are, and you would make your choice.
Do we have runoff elections in Massachusetts?
Sometimes municipal elections have runoffs, but I think at least with a runoff, you know who the final choices are, and you can make a decision based on that information, as opposed to when you have multiple candidates up front and you're trying to figure out how to rank people. I think that's a much more difficult thing for the voter.
The other argument about runoff elections is they're expensive. it would be to have ranked choice voting. And I don't mean to keep throwing all the opposition to you, but the runoff elections can be expensive, and ranked choice voting would eliminate that, particularly in a town government where people would be certainly worried about costs.
If you have a ranked choice election, it is going to be more expensive than a traditional election. And certainly you're going to need a significant amount of voter education because it is confusing and it is hard to understand. And I think aside from the cost, and maybe more importantly, I worry that you're going to have people losing faith in it, because I think people, right now we have a simple system that everybody can understand. But if you look at the process that's used to reallocate votes, it is fairly complex, and it may take weeks. You know, if you look at the election in Maine a couple of years ago, I mean, they only had 4 candidates and it took 9 days to get the result. Imagine if we had 8, 9, or 10 candidates. So I'm not sure. Yes, there may be some costs involved in having a second election, but I think people would have more faith in that than this kind of long, drawn-out process where you wait weeks and people don't necessarily understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Cheryl, I want to know, how did you become involved with No to Ranked Choice? Why does this mean so much to you?
I became involved because I am part of the Westford Republican Town Committee, and we actually had someone come and speak to us for it and someone come and speak to us against it. And the more I learned about it, the more I really just thought, I just did not think this was a good system. While it may have some advantages like any system, I just felt really strongly that this is really not the way to go. And several other places have tried it and repealed it. I don't think it's the way to go. I think it's a difficult system to understand. And you look at other places that have done it, they've had more error rates. People don't really understand that if you don't rank all the candidates, that you're really not going to be participating potentially in the runoff. I just don't think it's worth making our system that much more complex. I don't think I don't think it does a lot of the things that it promises.
So, Cheryl, if people want to learn more about No to Ranked Choice or just inform themselves more on this topic, how can they go about doing that?
They can go to our website, rankedchoiceisnochoice.com, or they can go to Facebook. Kind of the easiest way to find it, we did a tinyurl.com/NoRCV, and we have videos and all kinds of articles that they can read to learn more about it.
We'd love to catch up with you, if you're okay with that, after November 3rd and see how the results played out.
Sure. Thank
Take
you
care.
very much for having me.
Thank you.